speakers from the Canossian School, of course, the designated school for children with hearing difficulties. Of course, we have Dr. Geraldine Tan from 91.3 FM, and she's the resident radio psychologist that talks to everybody in their cars when they go to work. So I'll be starting out today with a simple message from the sponsors, the Listening Lab, which is my company, and I just want to introduce the people we have today. I've mentioned Dr. Geraldine Tan. I also have with us Miss Christina Michael, Principal of Canossian School. We also have Ms. Tang Yin Leng, audiologist on habilitation services in Canossian School, and Ms. Doris Ang, Manager of Audiological Habilitations and Community Engagement Division of the Canossian School. Okay, so to start things off, I'm just going to go through a very quick message by the sponsors, my company, the Listening Lab. So here we go. Okay, just a brief introduction to who the Listening Lab is. We are very, very pleased to get the parties here together to go through what is very exciting topics and as very, very niche topics actually for many parents who might need this advice. And the Listening Lab was basically founded by me about 4 years ago. And we had a couple of milestones over the years in which we slowly became bigger and had more audiology centers in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. We're also not just a hearing care provider in terms of audiometric and audiological testing. We also support cochlear implants, especially for Singapore. And we help to bring patients who will need implants as opposed to hearing aids. We cover both the market for hearing aids as well as cochlear implants. This is just a range of the services that we provide. It's a wide range, largely includes hearing aid fittings. That might be the one that you're most familiar with. We also maintain devices. We're also an engineering company in the sense that we build hearing enhancement systems for public buildings, which is now a requirement by law. We do home visits and, of course, listening rehabilitation. So getting better hearing isn't just about getting a hearing aid from somewhere. There is a rehabilitation process to follow. Your audiologist or audiometrician will work with you, gradually increase amplification, increase your listening skills such that at the end of a period of time, you have much better understanding skills with your hearing device, whether be it a cochlear implant or a hearing aid. All right, so these are a list of our centers in Singapore and Malaysia. We have 7 centers in Singapore and 5 in Malaysia, all centered around Petaling Jaya and Selangor. In Singapore, we cover the whole region, most of the, except really up north. Yeah. Okay, whole life hearing services are covered by the Listening Lab, from cochlear implant, tinnitus management, as well as hearing aid rehabilitation. As you know, when it comes to hearing, there's been a lot more awareness these days about the consequences of unaided or untreated hearing loss. There are many. Dementia is the one that's most commonly talked about these days because of the new clinical research that has linked unaided hearing loss with the higher incidence of dementia. And there can be a very profound psychological and social impact when it comes to untreated hearing loss. These are some of the many conditions that people with prolonged unaided hearing loss may have to go through. Now, these are just an example of devices that the Listening Lab would fit in order to bring back hearing for someone who requires hearing loss. These are just some of the models. In any doubt, always ask your nearby audiology center, your audiologist for more advice on what devices might be suitable. Always go through a test, and a trained audiometrician or audiologist can really help you with finding a solution for hearing loss. These are some of the technologies that are available nowadays. It is very advanced, and we're able to track very well basically what the user is going through and improve his listening experience. Okay, that comes to the end of my segment. So in my first part, I'm going to invite the principal of Canossian School, Ms. Christina Michael, to give us an introduction of Canossian and actually what they do to basically help this segment of Singapore society. So Christina, over to you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Good evening to everyone. I'm Christina Michael, principal of the school. Thank you all for spending this Friday evening with us. We hope that today's presentation will provide information and tips that would be useful to you as parents. I will begin with an overview of the school. We are a special education school. We take in children from 7 to 12 years old. with varying degrees of hearing loss. All our children come in fitted with some kind of a device, but that's only the beginning of their journey with us, having their device. We help them a lot with their learning. And Canossian School for Hearing Loss is a faith-based school that was founded by the Canossian Daughters of Charity. We are located at number 1 Salim Road. And in a short while, I'll explain to you why the 1 Salim Road is one of the best known secrets in the education sector. These are our vision, our mission, and our values. And character development is a very important part of our education. Although we are a faith-based school, we've taken children of all races, all religions, all backgrounds, as long as your primary disability is hearing loss. This is the profile of students at our school. We are very small, and we have an advantage in being small because that allows us to have a very much smaller student-teacher ratio. And we will share a little bit about that eventually. Well, maybe I want you to just look at what's on the right side of the slide. That's the audio profile, the types of hearing devices that we have, and the communication approaches. Most of our children are oral, so they use spoken language and they listen through their devices. So we are primarily oral. Take the primarily oral approach in the school. And we are very fortunate because we have an on-site child development unit that comes with a team of therapists who provide support for children who need the kind of support, whatever kind of support that they need. And we will elaborate as we go along. When you come to Canossian School, you don't just come to one school, you come to a whole village. And that's the beauty about what the sisters have done for us. When they started the school, they built it as a complex with our school at one end, and right next to us is, you see, what's unique about the school is inclusion. The sisters have believed that inclusion is the way to go for children with hearing loss, especially with this disability. So students from our school attend lessons alongside their hearing peers at Canossa Catholic Primary School, which is a mainstream primary school. So our children actually get a mainstream education. And they are in the class, they are assigned classes at Canossa Catholic Primary School. I'll refer to this as CCPS further down the presentation. We adopt a pull-out model of inclusion. What does that mean? What it means is while the children study at varying hours with their peers at Canossa Catholic Primary School at CCPS, if we find that they need a little bit more support, then our teachers will pull them out and provide them the instruction at our school at Canossian School. So what we do is we actually customize the amount of time that each child spends either at the mainstream or at our school with getting support from our teachers. We also have, so in the afternoons after school, the children from Canossian School and CCPS go over to the student care center. And at the student care, they are supervised, they do homework, and then they get pastoral care education. I've mentioned our child development unit, and we're also very, very lucky because we've got babies on site. So we have Canossaville Preschool. The preschool takes in children from 18 months to 7 years old. So what we hope, and this is a mainstream preschool, but they do take in children with hearing loss. Remember I said the sisters believe in inclusion, and that's why we do this. So all the children here, whether at Canossian School or at the preschool, are amongst hearing peers all the time. So that provides a very language-rich environment, which they need for their education. So when you come to one school, we get all of this along the same, and there are no borders, there are no gates across any of these sectors. If you want to find out a little bit more about how we operate, recently there was an article in Straits Times. That's the QR code if you want to find out a little bit more, read about the article. It will explain to you how the Canossian Circle of Care operates, and there's support for all the children across all sectors. Recently, there was also a video that was released by Lian Foundation. They've come in to provide some funding for us. And what this video features one of our students, and through the video, you get an idea of how the Canossian village supports each child. So you've heard the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. That's exactly what's happening here. And rather than just go on and on about our school, I've got a little video here because the video speaks far greater volume than me talking. Watch the video and you will get a better sense of how we operate. So can we have the video, please? So I'm going to hand you over now to Dr. Geraldine Tan, our main speaker, and she's going to talk about common learning disorders, some of which occur with hearing loss. So over to you, Geraldine.
Hi. Okay, so I just have to, okay, it's so interesting. The spotlight is now on me. I don't know why my light is like that, but I literally have a spotlight right on top of me. But good evening, everyone. everyone. I'm Geraldine. I'm the psychologist from the therapy room. And I really was so entranced by the video. I was almost tearing at the end. I was like, oh my gosh, the children, so beautiful. You really embody it takes a village to raise a child. Yes, and welcome all our listeners today and on Facebook Live. And welcome to P2 Ha. So the first time I heard it, I was like, huh, what is it? It's phase 2. Heightened alert.
Alert.
Yeah, heightened alert. It's so interesting, but we are now in another space, and our children are doing home-based learning. So I know a lot of parents are really giving their grown and children also. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but before that, I want to thank Listening Lab and Canossian School for giving us the opportunity to talk today, to reach out, because one thing that I love to do is to reach out to as many people as possible to help them understand the different disorders and how it can comorbid with disorders, across disorders, right? And we are looking at inclusion and inclusivity. So I really love the idea that babies are in the school. Oh my gosh. Yes. But today we're not talking about babies, we're talking about the children. And I'm going to focus on the social and emotional concerns of the children, actually of the parents with hearing loss, okay? And I think a lot of times we miss out on this part. We are very concerned with the disorder. We forget that there is more components to it. So I'm going to try and look a little bit more into it. But before that, maybe I can introduce myself a little bit more. I'm Geraldine Tan, and I think I prefer people to call me Jerry, but a lot of people like to call me Dr. Jerry. The DR in front of my name is sometimes something that I go, oh, but it just means duties and responsibilities. So it's okay to call me Jerry. Okay, I also consult at Mount E Hospital and also at the Erland Dyslexic Center. Across the different countries, I also do go there. And my team is growing, very, very happy. And then with me, I think I have my team also peeking into our show, our little workshop. And I lecture across different universities. So very excited, and the crisis work that we do, and trust me, the pandemic is a crisis for all of us. Been in this line for about 20 odd years, and in this 20 odd years, my encounter with different children, different parents, and I really am very privileged to journey with many of the parents and children. So I feel free to comment if you are on any of our Canossian School Facebook, the Listening Lab Facebook, and the Therapy Room Facebook. Just comment, ask your questions, and I think Calvin, who is somewhere out there, will be moderating the questions. All right. Okay, let's look at some of the replies that you have given us. If you have time to do the survey right at the beginning of our workshop. Let's see, Carissa, do we have some of the challenges that parents have? Do you want to flash that, or shall I go straight into it? I think I shall go straight into it. Are you clicking? Okay. No worries. We're going to look at 5 different areas, and I think Carissa, who is helping me, will just prompt me with some of the challenges that all of you have. And the first thing we are going to talk about is loss. And you go like, what is loss? A disorder means a disorder. A hearing loss is a hearing loss. What other losses are there? So how many people have actually asked this question, right? Of course, there are losses. And if we look at it, when someone has a hearing loss, it is not just the hearing that they have lost. They have lost a lot of other opportunities. What do I mean? The opportunity of making a friend. I was just chatting with a 20-plus-year-old client, just a couple of days ago. And she was very upfront. She says that it's so difficult, Jerry. It's like I try to talk to someone, and because I'm using a hearing aid and I'm trying to lip read, but sometimes it's really difficult. So when people ask once too many times, they just lose us. They just, or I lose them. I cannot figure out what they're talking about, and they get upset with me. So a social connection is lost. There are times when they try to go into the community, and how many of them, and maybe you have identified some of them, lose out on jobs because the employer says, oh, but you cannot really hear properly. Oh, you have a hearing aid. Or I think this job is not suitable for you. So they lose out on jobs. Then we have the certain sort of lifestyle. Now, this one is interesting. And maybe if you can comment, you can let me know what sort of lifestyle you think you might lose out on. And I say it's an interesting one because it's a perceived loss. Because I believe that each one is capable of doing anything that they set their minds to. And the teachers later on can jump in and let us know. Communication, the loss of that connection sometimes, but is communication only verbal? I do want all of us to think about it. And I don't think communication is only verbal. And it's so amazing the different sort of communication that we have. Honestly, right? If we think about it, if communication is only verbal, then our teens are very jialat, isn't it? Because if you ask them anything, they answer with one word. I have my older boy now who is a teen, and I can text him an entire paragraph, and he answers with okay. And I'll go, what is okay? In my sessions, I have my teens coming in and I ask them how their day is, what has been going on, and they go, normal law. Now, is that communication? I don't know. But I do know that many of these people with hearing losses are not any different from you and I. So, but we think that they lose out on certain areas. So I do want us to think about it. Is it a perceived loss? Is it a loss that we as a society create, or is it a real loss? And as we look at losses, before I look at the challenges, let me go into some of the areas that is sometimes missed. Okay, so as a psychologist, we do a lot of testings. Okay, and if I can go on to the next slide, we can see, what are some disorders that can be missed when we have hearing loss. Okay, so the first one is ADHD. So they're not exempted, So it's like saying someone with, who is short-sighted cannot have all these comorbid disorders. No, that's not true. Okay, but sometimes it's more difficult to figure out what's going on with the child when they display certain behaviors. Okay, because sometimes they appear to be impulsive, but it could be that they are reacting to certain things that they hear or not hear, right? So ADHD is one of it. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Now, the next one is dyslexia. Okay, so they find it difficult to kind of figure out to acquire certain information, and usually it is seen in the language. So they do not have a language disorder, but the learning of it is kind of affected. Okay, so we do see like they have different difficulty in word recognition, the spelling, the decoding, might be affected. But because it's about language, it can be easily missed because, we don't know whether it's part of the hearing loss or it's completely different. Now, there is autism. So ASD, autism, where they may be a bit more rigid. Again, it might be missed because sometimes when we are familiar with a certain routine, we want to keep with that routine because it just helps our limitations. So again, it's very difficult to discern whether the disorder is, present or not. Right? So these are learning disorders that can comorbid with hearing losses. Okay, and I suppose that's where we would need to consult the audiologist. So I think in Canossian School, there are audiologists. Kelvin also has a team of audiologists, and they would be able to help us distinguish whether certain behaviors belong to the hearing loss or it is peculiar and we need to have additional help. Okay, and that's when you go to a psychologist who would be helping us. You mean I have 10 minutes? Oh my gosh. Okay, I've mood disorders also. Now, many of them, besides the learning disorders, can have mood disorders also. Okay, so the client that came to me a couple of days ago, the client was very depressed. She had very low moods. Okay, and she was just saying, I can't find happiness. And it can cause a lot of frustration. So any sort of limitations in our body can cause our mood to fluctuate. There's also anxiety where we start to feel conscious, anxious. And I'm going to push on a little bit because I have so much to cover. Let's push on to the challenges. I did say that our children have a lot of challenges, and oh my gosh, now is home-based learning. And we hear the mainstream children and their parents complaining, but I was just chatting with the team from the Canossian School, and do you know that the teachers are also putting in so much effort to engage the children? And I think, one of the challenges that we don't realize that these children have is, they try very hard. They really put in a lot of effort. But do we know how much of the technology that is required, whether it is available or not, right? Even just attempting to figure out to hear, they are putting in effort, trying to communicate with the other person and communicate by letting people know, especially during this time. It is very difficult. Can you imagine if they need to lip read? Now you can see my lips, but on the train, the bus outside now, we can only see each other's face, which is only 1/3. We can only see the eyes. They cannot see the mouth. So how can they lip read? So that's another issue that they are having. Did we actually realize that? and I think they are largely misunderstood. We think that they cannot do a lot of things. That's not true. They can have fun. They love music. I think earlier in the video, we saw them playing musical instruments, and my clients play the drum. It's amazing. And they can skateboard. They can basically do anything anybody else do. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at them being disordered? No, they are not. They are as able as you and I. And just like I'm wearing contact lens, they just need to wear a hearing aid. Yeah. But I also know that, they have difficulty with their friends, because when they are trying to engage with their friends, the friends might find it a bit difficult to relate to them, and they don't understand how it is like not to be able to hear clearly. So play can be curtailed or even bullying. So we do need to look out for those issues. But I think one thing I want to say is that they don't need to apologize. They don't need to apologize for their hearing loss. Just like how Calvin was trying to apologize at the beginning for his pronunciation, he thinks that there is an issue, but in actual fact, no one else thinks that it is an issue. So I think we need to remember that, it is okay to be who we are. And I want all the parents to encourage your children to be who they are, because they're beautiful children and they have their own strengths and abilities. So I'm going to jump to the parents now, because I know the parents were very concerned, and they were saying that, how can I educate everyone that my child has an issue? How about educating everyone how wonderful your children are? And to let them know how to interact with them. If we as parents do not see the beauty in our children, and help others to see the beauty in our children, then how do our children see the beauty in themselves, right? And I know a lot of parents are very concerned about where to get the best technology and the best care. So that's why I'm so happy to pair, our two partners today, Convention School and the Listening Lab, and they will let you know a little bit more. And I've cut away a lot of different parts because I know I'm running late. But I do want to say this, one of the parents asked, how do I spend time with not spend time with myself, but, I've no time for myself. But I will encourage all parents to have self-care. Your children definitely want you to look after yourself, and you do need to look after yourself so that you can, run the longer mile with them, and enjoy this parenthood in a far healthier way. I would say be kind to yourself. And I will just draw ourselves to the last part here, interprofessional communication. So we talk about communication. It's not only with our children, but also it takes the entire team to work together to help your child. So reach out for resources. You have resources all over. Please ensure that you reach out and connect them. You can see all of us here, and all of us are very, very excited to journey with your children. So don't be shy. You can bug us, just not in the middle of the night, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that you want. We will be happy to, we definitely want to journey with you and make your life a little bit smoother, and I know our theme of today is, hear with our ears, listen with your brain. But I want to flash the very last slide, because being a psychologist, we work with emotions. And I love to tell the little ones that Auntie Jerry is an emotions doctor. So how do you spell love? No, we don't spell love. we feel it. So I'm going to end with that and pass it over to the Coronation School again, who will take us on another journey to understand a bit more about the technological part of hearing loss.
Thank you, Geraldine, for your brief but insightful presentation and slides. So we're going to get our next two speakers, Ms. Tang Yin Ling, as well as Ms. Doris Ang from Canossian School, to give us an introduction on the Canossian services.
Sorry, Kelvin, I was going to hijack for a little bit more before I pass it over to the rest of them. Jerry, thank you for talking about the challenges that these children have. Yes. The sad part is what the research is showing is that about 40 to 50% of children with hearing loss would have co-occurring disabilities, which is exactly what Jerry was going through. So she made our jobs a lot easier because she introduced all of some of the commonly occurring disabilities. Now, you may have wondered why we had the title that we had. And here's, I'm just going to sort of explain to you, because we actually just hear with our ears. That's where the sound is collected. And then it passes in through the auditory nerve and vestibular cochlear nerve into the brain. It's the brain that interprets the sound. And that's where meaning is made. So, and that's the process of listening. So there's a difference between hearing and listening. And unfortunately, when there's a deficit, when there's a disorder with the hearing, somewhere along the way, something may happen to the listening as well. So what we need to do is make sure that the children can hear to the best of their abilities with their devices, or even if they're not wearing devices, if they choose to go signing, they still have to hear or see the visual language. But what's important is to make sure that they can interpret and listen with their brains to make sense of what people are saying. And that's one reason why they have problems with the communication sometimes. So the hearing, hearing loss is sometimes called a silent disability. And it's called that not because of the absence of sound. It's because a lot is going on in the brain and there are connections that are not quite right. That's why they face all these learning disorders. That's why they face learning challenges, because the connections are not quite right. And that's where the silence lies, at least for the educator. So that's why we also call it a silent disability. All right, so I think what we're saying now is it is a complex disability. You don't just fit with hearing aids or cochlear implants and assume all is well. That's a misconception. And that's why we do so much to advocate for the needs of our children, because the basic, the fundamental principle is you don't fix a child with just hearing aids. You've got to understand what's happening in their information processing, the listening part for them to make sense of what's happening. All right, so there are many, to understand the impact of hearing loss, there's a lot of information that we need. So if your teachers at your school ask a whole lot of questions, there's a reason why they're getting all that information. Because every child, if you look at this slide and you just look at the areas that have an educational impact on the hearing, on the loss of the child, you will understand why it's so complex. And for each of these factors, it's different for every child. Which is why at our school, at least, we use all of this information to build a profile for every student. And based on that, we develop an intervention plan appropriate for the child. So the educational impact, we can look at it in three broad areas. Primarily in language and communication. So some of you raised the difficulties with the language that the children are facing. It's not just in the spoken language. Even if they're signing, sometimes it's in the signing language, the syntax of signing language, or even it's in the written form. And maybe what is important is for you to understand this. In a noisy environment, or if there are multiple speakers, your child may only hear 70% or 50% or 30% of what is said. especially in a noisy classroom, noisy canteen, indoor sports hall where the acoustics is poor, all this contributes to the inability to hear completely like a hearing person. So sometimes the teacher is looking at this and saying, this child, how come this child just can't understand? And then the teacher will ask, or parents would ask, can you hear? And the child will say, yes, but the parent doesn't know, or the teacher doesn't know that I only heard 30% or 50%. So that's not the question to ask. The question to ask is, can you repeat what I just said? And once you ask that question, you will get an indication of how much they're really listening, what their listening ability is. So that affects their language and communication. Then of course, their speech is as good as what they hear. So if they're not in a language-rich environment with good role models for speech, they're not going to speak very well. So the environment is very important. And Doris later on will explain to you why the home environment and the role of parents is so important in helping the child build communication and language. And you also heard Jerry speak about their social functioning. Yes, it is a loss. So these do impact the child. It's not just about the hearing. We got to look at all of these aspects in the development of the child. So how does it affect academic achievement? When you have hearing loss, understand that there's reduced sound and speech input. And this is in an oral environment. And as I explained to you, sometimes they only hear 30 or 50 or 70%. So there's speech that's lost. And when speech is lost, meaning is lost. And they have this difficulty with incidental learning. Incidental learning is when we're not focusing on what somebody is saying. Sometimes we have the TV on, and then we pick up little bits of what is said. We're not actually focusing on it, but we hear it. And that's what we call incidental learning. And all of us actually are taking in a lot of information through incidental learning. These children don't have that advantage. So we have to be very explicit and deliberate in what it is that we need to say for us to get them to understand what it is that we want them to understand. And all of this can result in poor academic performance. But the truth is that all is not lost. Now, a question that parents usually have when you have a child with hearing loss is, or if I say I work with children with hearing loss, and the first thing they'll ask me is that, so do you use sign? No, you don't need to. There are different modes of communication that's available to these children. And you must understand that it's not a binary function. It's not speech or sign. It's a continuum. And the choice, so that's why we call it a communication option. They have either pure spoken language and listening through their hearing devices, or they could be in an environment that's completely sign, where they use a visual language. So there is a continuum, and somewhere in between is what you could be mostly auditory or mostly visual, different degrees. And what happens sometimes to help them on either end of the spectrum is the use of augmentative alternative communication, AAC. So you saw in the video some of the children using these like iPads with a special software. That's a software that helps them with language and with communication. But we're not going to speak so much about that. But just understand that it's not either speech or signing. There is a continuum. And how do you decide which option to take for your child? Speak to your audiologist, speak to your pediatrician, speak to your speech and language therapist. They will sort of give you an indication of what's best for your child. And of course, home environment plays a very important role in that. So given that it's such a complex disability, the best kind of support that we can give the child comes from a multidisciplinary team, comprising the audiologist, the speech therapist, occupational therapist, psychologist, specialist teacher of children with hearing loss, sign language teacher if your child has gone for a signing option, and even an educational interpreter who helps in a signing environment. So you need this whole team. And I'm just going to hand you over to Yunling, who is our audiologist in school, and she will talk about the kinds of support that we provide at school. Yin Ling, over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Christina. I just want to address a few concerns that we will face when we have children with hearing loss educating in a mainstream setting. Basically, there are three areas where modifications and accommodations need to be made. First is the curricular assess. That means how they assess the curriculum and what kind of curriculum. Secondly is the social and communication support. And thirdly is a learning environment for them, whether it is conducive or not conducive. So in Canossian School, our audio unit, basically we are involved in two of the three areas mentioned above. That is social and communication support, as well as the conducive learning environment. And let me just walk you through a little bit about how we support our students in these two areas. In the social and communication support, let us start with hearing technology. Every day we will conduct a listening check in the morning to check our students' devices. We check the battery strength, we check the sound distortion, we check the FM connection to ensure that the students have a good and working device to start the school day. This will minimize downtime of the equipment and so reduce loss of curriculum time. Then we also conduct annual audio assessments for them so that we can monitor their hearing thresholds and the condition of their devices, whether it is still good enough to support them. Otherwise, we will highlight to the parents and we will work with the parents to manage the children. We also do a speech perception test routinely because we need to know how well these children perceive speech in noisy environment, basically, because like what Ms. Christina has mentioned just now, classrooms are very noisy places, canteens are very noisy places. So you want to know like how well these children are hearing, basically. And we will work with the teachers and the speech therapists to see how best to strengthen their speech and language development. We also do technical support for them. Whenever their devices malfunction, we will troubleshoot, provide replacements, and also loaners of devices if necessary. We have in-house earmo labs, and our technician can do earmos for students when their earmos need replacements. And we also provide the FM systems for them to use in classrooms. Let me move on to the social skills part. We design and deliver a series of lessons called the Adaptive Living Lessons for all our students from P1 all the way to P6s. Because we feel that they need skill sets like this in order to proactively help themselves create a conducive listening environment. So what is included in this series of lessons are self-advocacy skills, and then this is designed in alignment with the Minnesota Compensatory Skills. So in the series of lessons, we teach them to have some basic knowledge about hearing loss, because in self-advocacy, there are three main areas. They need to know themselves, they need to know what they need, and they need to know how to get it. So with basic knowledge about hearing loss and knowledge about the different types of devices that they use and how to get help, they will be able to speak up for themselves in situations of needs. We also teach them some very simple communication strategies like facing the speaker, use some repair strategies, staying away from noise source if they need to hear their friends, for instance, so that they can, like I said earlier on, proactively create an easier listening environment for themselves. The other area which the audio unit plays an active role in is in creating a conducive learning environment for the students. So in Canossian School, the class size is kept very small and the classrooms are acoustically treated. FM systems are provided to support students both in Canossian School as well as in our sister school, CCPS. And in Canossian schools, our classrooms are also air conditioned. So on top of being acoustically treated, it's aircon so that we can keep the external noise out. So you can see some of our teachers working in Canossian school as well as in our sister school in CCPS. Okay, next I will pass over to Doris so that she can talk to you more about the parental support and home support. Doris?
Okay, thank you, Yingling. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Doris, and I have worked with Canossian School for 17 years, partnering and engaging parents of children with hearing loss. So Canossian School runs a parent guidance program, which is customized to meet the needs of each family as reflected by its rationale, beginning where parents are the start of a journey on an unfamiliar road. So it can't be said enough that early intervention is critical. And the main aim of this parent guidance program is we want to take the pressure away. We want to equip parents with key knowledge and skills to support their child and create a conducive home environment. We want to be able to provide a bridge to relevant resources, professionals to support child's development. And we want to enable parents to share responsibility for their child's development in listening and speech. And last but not least is to lead parents to build towards confidence, competency, and independence in managing their child. So as shared by the earlier speakers, the challenges and impact a child with hearing loss will have on education, I can't stress enough on the importance of parent involvement. Children's education begins from birth with parents as their first teachers and role models. So parents are very important, the critical bridge between school and home, where you will instill positive attitudes and values towards learning and life. Parents' engagement in their children's upbringing, education is very crucial for holistic development. Parents, when you're involved, it helps extend teaching outside the classroom. So it will create a very positive experience for your child and helps them to perform better in school and develop positive peer relationship. Of course, the venue where the most learning will happen is your child's home. So we have a shared responsibility in educating students. As research says, parental involvement is key. Thus, to predict successful outcomes in newly diagnosed babies or to become successful language user, the active participation of parents, parent involvement becomes the ultimate potential. So I'm now sharing some ways how you can, as parents, support your child's education. First, be partners in your child's play. Play with your child. Don't play with your phone. Play games, card games, board games, wacky games, baking, cooking, art and craft, and the list just goes on. Remember, the venue where learning takes place the most is your home. So provide them a favorable learning environment that goes beyond school so that they can be encouraged to continue that learning at home, and you are the best educator. Read with your child, read a book together, encourage interest, inculcate reading habits. Jen's meta-analysis has indicated that this is a significant predictor of success in primary school students. The more they read, it will stimulate their imagination, expand their understanding of the world. It helps them develop language, listening skills, and prepares them to understand the written word. Ask your child about their school day. Don't just ask, how's your day? I think the general response will be, okay, I don't know, maybe okay, like that, nod their head. But ask questions that encourage them to talk more. For example, okay, so for example, you can ask them like, you know, who do you play with Who do you sit by at lunch? What is your favorite part of the day? Right? And have that open communication on their academic and non-academic matters, and the clear display of interest in your child's general and academic well-being. What are your expectations at home for learning and behavior? I'm not sure if you can see the first picture. Are they visually represented? This is our classroom. So here you can see that it shows the learning expectations, the responsibilities, their behavior, the appropriate behavior that they have to display in school. So what you can do is to put the visual at home. Are your goals SMART? Are they specific? Can it be measured? How many activities, how much do they have to do? Is it achievable based on their capabilities? Is it relevant, to their current interests? What about the time that you set out for them? You can build in homework time each night. Stay consistent. Make homework your child's responsibility and not yours. You can maintain positive communication with your child's teachers and therapists, because communication is crucial for parents to stay updated with your child's progress in school and align their actions accordingly. And parents being actively involved much earlier on can help you in the early detection and resolution of a child's disciplinary or academic problems. And the effects of your engagement on your child's emotional and intellectual well-being and their self-efficacy and motivation to learn and succeed will be lifelong. So when schools, families, and community groups work together to support learning, children will tend to do better in school, stay in school longer, and like school more. And before I end, I'd like to share that Kenosha School is going to produce a guide for parents of children with hearing loss. It's going to be available in hard copy, in soft copy soon, and it will be placed at hospitals like KKH, NUH, SGH, and some other private sectors. And this guide for parents would include basic information about hearing loss, the impact of hearing loss, and schooling options for children, and many other useful information. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Doris, for your time and for a very nice, very good presentation that covers a lot of the essential topics that we were looking forward to hear from. Okay, we're now going to go with a Q&A session now. So if you do have questions, you can always put it in any of the comments of the Facebook channel you're watching, whether it's Listening Lab, Kenosha School, or the Therapy Room. Put your questions in. Someone will bring out a relevant question and address it to the right professional here that is speaking with us. Okay, so I do have maybe a couple of questions coming in now. Maybe speakers, I will just put it to any of you, and please feel free to whoever likes to take it up to answer. Someone has actually commented as one of the challenges that the parent typically faces is that they find it hard to make others understand the challenges the child is going through. And I think this is really sometimes in a social context, whether it's a casual social situation or more in-depth one, like with family members or relatives that you meet now and then. Yeah, so what would you think would help them to strategies or tactics to make them help understand that maybe a child cannot hear as clearly as what they perceive normal hearing children to experience? Anybody want to pick up this question?
Okay, maybe I'll pick that up. Okay, for children, for people with hearing loss, whether they're adults or children, I think Ms. Christina has touched a little bit on the connection of the brain and the ears, right? So the ears basically is a doorway. So when sound comes in through the ears and reaches the brain, it has to be interpreted. And when a person has hearing loss, the process, the auditory processing, there will be a certain degree of deficit, even if he's already fitted with hearing devices. So I think the idea that the general public has is that once you are fitted with hearing devices, your hearing is restored to normal, which is never the case. So I think it needs a bit of explanation for parents to help their children tell people who, especially people whom they meet for the first time, to let them know that this is the situation. So even though the child is fitted with hearing aids or cochlear implant, their hearing is not restored to normal. So there will be certain communication techniques that we need to employ when we want to speak to them.
Okay, thanks, Yingling. Maybe I'll just add on to Yingling's reply. One thing that you don't do is keep your child at home and don't let them socialize. But you probably need to prep them prior to going out. So it's like doing a little rehearsal. Talk to them and tell them who they would expect to see, who these people are, how to address them. And that makes it a little easier. Actually building social skills, you can even, when you have conversations at home, you role play this situation, that's the social situation that you're going to be in. Role play, rehearse with them so that they have some ideas of how to respond, and then it becomes easier. So those are things that can be done. Whatever it is, it's also important for you to keep up with your therapies. Whether it's the speech therapy, whatever form of therapy that you're going, it's very important for parents to keep up with the therapies. And this is something that I'd like to share because we've seen children, after they're fitted, parents drop off all the therapies, possibly because of time, but it's to the detriment of your child. So please make it a point to keep up with these therapies, especially the speech therapy. The easier it is for them to communicate, the greater they grow, the more confident they become. And the more confident they are, the easier social settings become. So please keep up with your therapies.
Thank you, Christina and Yinling. So this is actually a very good point. I think a lot of people have this assumption that once you are fitted with the device, be it an implant or hearing aid, magically things resolve by itself. This is like thinking that if you sell a bicycle, the people get healthier, but it's not the selling of the bicycle that makes someone happier or that makes someone healthier. It's not the buying or the selling, but it's the usage. So if you're not using a bicycle and you're not taught to use a bicycle or the right techniques to use a bicycle, you're not going to get healthier. And unlike a bicycle, actually all the modern day hearing devices come packed with a lot of technology that monitor the usage, how you adjusting the volume, are you changing programs, are you struggling with the device, that's recorded. And that's where your habilitation is, your audiologist, your audiometrician can come in, look at the data and say, hey, look, I think this person might be struggling in a certain situation, and I can adjust that. And that's why these follow-up aftercare and rehab programs are very important. Hearing aids and cochlear implants is not just about fitting and walking off. There's a lot of rehab that goes in. In fact, the majority of the benefit comes when you adhere to a very good and strong rehab program. And I think that generally is understood among professionals. Now we just have to basically get the word out so that users and caregivers really understand this point. Okay, relating to Christina's comment, there is one question about challenges the child faces, which I think you touched briefly on, but maybe we can go a little bit in depth. Maybe I can put this a bit to Geraldine as well. How does the child feel? How do we get the child to feel a bit more engaged and to feel part of society that they seemingly have the impression that they're quite different from? How would you encourage a better alignment to have them feel more with the society that they are part of?
I think that's it falls into the stigma, right? So a lot of times there's always that surrounding idea that there is something wrong, and the child learns that, hey, society thinks that there is something wrong with me. But we want to help them understand that they are not wrong. They can do what other people can also do, and to encourage them to include themselves. So as a community, we try to include them. We need to encourage the children to also include themselves. and to pluck up that courage, to reach inside themselves and to try different things. They need to be brave to try and allow themselves to see that they are capable and they are able and they are not limited by their one thing. They're not just limited by their hearing loss, so they also need to let their friends know, so let the people in their environment know that, hey, I'm no different from you, and to help them to understand, to connect with them, in different ways, because they can. So just like what Doris said, right? Card games. I'm sure we can all engage with card games. It doesn't matter whether, I've got, I'm short-sighted, or you've got hearing loss, or, one thing or other, we are all able to play that card game, right? We do not need to isolate anyone. And the last thing we want is for the child themselves to isolate themselves. So yeah, be brave.
Thanks a lot, Geraldine. Okay, so we have one last question coming in, and that's where I think this is a bit more of a something that might be a little bit more challenging as well. The child faces the obvious challenge of not being able to hear so well, even if he is fitted with a device. So normal hearing and a device aided hearing, there can be some disparity very often of the time. So there's usually quite some frustration of emotional kind of outpouring from this sort of sensation. What would you all think would be a good way to kind of manage this sort of frustration, which will come and go as the child evolves over time in his behaviors and evolves over time as he gets older? Anybody? Anybody?
It was too tough. None of us want to take it up.
So it falls to the leader, Ms. Christina.
Okay, I think this is where one thing that's very important is for children to build their own self-concept. And that comes with understanding that, yes, I have hearing loss. Like, for example, I'm wearing glasses, right? I'm totally blind, almost blind without this. But even if I take off my glasses, I can still do anything that anybody else is able to do. And this is because we have this belief in our own abilities. And it's very important that the family and the school setting keeps affirming them when they can do whatever everybody else is doing, to the point where they feel that, hey, it's no big deal. Okay, so I've lost one faculty. But quite likely, and I think God is very fair, when you lose one faculty, he overcompensates in another faculty. Which is why we find our children are very, very creative. They're very good in the arts. They love music. They love to sing. They're very good in the drums. One of our boys, we have a garden, and he's able to go out into the garden with his iPad. He uses this software and he identifies the plants, and he tells us about the plants. And then he'll tell us, what we can do with these plants. They find their abilities. So what we need to do is to shift that whole paradigm when we see that child, look at their abilities and their strengths. We all have deficits, but we've got enough, a very positive self-concept. That's why we can look beyond these disabilities and look at our strengths. And we do things that make us feel comfortable in our comfort zone, in our strengths. So we've got to help these children find their comfort zone, and constant affirmation. That's what's important.
Thank you. That was a very inspiring answer, Christina. Appreciate the answer very much. Okay, if not, we've come to the end of our session. I'm sure you will have questions that you would like on your own time to reach out to our speakers today. I've also asked that if you are interested to receive a copy of the slides, please send a message, a PM message to our respective Facebook accounts. Any Facebook account, we will share this information as long as you give us the permission, and we'll have the slides sent to your emails that you leave behind. In the meantime, if you do have questions to send to your these respective individuals and speakers, I'm going to flash now their email addresses on screen. You can just take a photo and then record it for what you need, and then reach out to them. And I'm sure they'll be very happy to kind of address any of the questions you might have. So I have myself, Kelvin Lee from the Listening Lab, Dr. Geraldine from the Therapy Room, Ms. Christina, Michael, Ms. Doris Ang, Ms. Tanin Leng from the Canossian School. The addresses are here. Just take a quick snapshot, and then you can email us at your own time. Okay, if not, I think we've come to the end of our session. And I'd like to thank everybody again for coming to our event. We appreciate it very much, as well as also thanks to our speakers, the Canossian School, the Therapy Room, for your valued time in sharing all this information that you have to people who are really in need of it. And the Listening Lab is very thankful that we have everyone on board here today giving us this information. Thank you very much. Okay, if not, then it's a good evening to everyone. Stay safe, take care. Try to come on to more webinars. I'll stop apologizing for my pronunciation. And yeah, we'll see everybody soon. Thank you, everybody. Good night.